I think we could probably get started in talking about the software here. Yeah, let's get started now. So I'm gonna just turn off rather my camera here, and we can dive in. Cool. Okay. So, so yeah, today we're going to be talking about Manage Mode in ACDSee Photo Studio Ultimate 2019. So just to give you an idea for the backdrop in regards to our products, we have 3 major products and 1 Mac product. So with these 3 major products, which are for PC, are the one we're using today, which is ACDSee Photo Studio Ultimate 2019. And then we also have a Pro 2019 and Standard 2019. And the difference between those 3 products are basically 2 things. In Ultimate is the sort of the collection of all of the functionality of and provides a platform to do layered editing in addition to raw development and management services. So it's like it is sort of the creme de la creme, if you will, of our products. The Pro version is very similar, but it doesn't provide that layered editing functionality. And then Standard doesn't provide the layered editing functionality or the development functionality. So for the purpose of doing workshops, I have a tendency to always do them in ACDSee Photo Studio Ultimate 2019, basically our top product. Now that being said, all of what we're going to be talking about today, for the most part, will also be referenceable in our other 2 products. And I'll probably mention where the sort of the differences pop up. But anyway, so let's dive in. So we are in Manage Mode. Now you can see which mode we're in because it's actually highlighted just at the top right-hand corner. And there's 5 sort of highlighted modes, 5 modes rather. And first is Manage. The second and third is Photos and View. The third is Develop and Edit. So just a really brief sort of outline of what these are. Manage Mode, which we'll see today, but Manage Mode is functionally for categorizing and navigation. It is the hub by which we find and sort of manage our files. Now, Photos and View Mode serve sort of different functionalities. Photos mode is for, it's essentially a delineation of all of your images, but it's done in a visual context instead of sort of in a folder-based context. View mode is as simple as it sounds. It's an image of it is a presentation of your image in sort of the maximum size available, and then there's some slight minor editing functions that you can take within it. Ooh. There we go. There's stalled out on me there for a sec. And then Develop Mode. Develop Mode is functionally for, it is for developing raw images. Now that being said, you can also develop JPEGs and PNGs and all sorts of different sub file types. But it provides an area for you to non-destructively edit those images. And then finally, Edit Mode is for editing and creating layered compositions. Now we're going to talk about Manage Mode today, but there will be a couple areas where we'll dart into Develop Mode and Edit Mode. Now I don't want to enlarge the scope of this too much, and part of the reason why is because I really want to focus on the functionality of Manage Mode and not sort of get into the software too much in terms of these other modes. And the reason why is because those modes in themselves have a lot going on, and there's a lot available to you there to explore as well. So let's just focus in on Manage Mode and make some go into those modes where needed. Now, just off the bat, so when we start here, what I'd like to mention too is if you have any questions moving forward for me, I will do my best to answer them. Please just type them out in the Q&A panel, which should be available to you just to type a question in there. And that gives me a really quick and easy way to sort of answer those questions and visually just check them off that I've answered them. That being said, not all the questions I'm going to be able to answer today, in which case just send me an email and I'll make sure to add my email to the chat panel so you see that. But we'll get back to everybody regardless of whether or not I can answer their question right now. So we just opened up the software, boom. By default, the software always lands in manage mode. And this is how you sort of begin the process, your workflow of finding and editing images and navigating and categorizing. Excuse me. So when you land in edit mode, in manage mode rather, what we should sort of break down from the very beginning is just what are we looking at? And in terms of the graphic user interface that we see here. And the reason why I want to do that now is because when we open this mode, there seems like there's a lot going on, but there's really just, in essence, 3 things going on. And it's good to emphasize that. So in this case, we have, let's break it into three sort of sections. On this left-hand side, what we have is functionally where we go to do our navigation to our files. And then when in the center is where we sort of preview and witness our images and sort of the folders and sort of locations on our computer that we've sort of navigated to. So this is just a display of the folder. In this case, if we're looking at our navigation, you can see that I'm under my folder tree here and I'm in my pictures folder. And then of course I have the date of this workshop, so December 12th, 2019, and then a variety of photos, pardon me, within that folder. So we're quite literally interacting with this folder. Now, before we talk about sort of the ratings and categorization, all of those things, it's really important to note that one of the strongest features and one of the oldest features of ACDSee as a product is the fact that it is not necessary to import images in the same context that it is with something like Lightroom. We're not importing anything. We're simply operating off of our hard drive. So in this case, when we see this folder tree, this is an exact replication of my pictures folder that exists on my hard drive. So when I'm looking at these images, when I'm editing these images, it's going to be a very fast and efficient process to sort of navigate and save down copies of this, whether it makes some changes to it, that sort of thing. All of those things operate within the hard drive. So if I want to cull files or if I want to remove things or something like that, I can do that within the program, and it also reflects our hard drive, just as saving a file would also do the same. So what I want to emphasize is that you're not working off of you're not bringing in files, in this case images, to sort of pull into this repertoire. You're working directly off of the hard drive. And so no import function is necessary. Now you might be thinking, hey Adam, that's great, but I can actually see an import button right at the top corner right here, under which a panel which we'll talk about in a sec. And what that functionally allows us to do within the software is take images that are on some form of external hard drive or camera or some other form, and then it helps us to move those images onto our hard drive or find a home for them. And this just functionally works in that we want to be able to do all these functionalities from within the software than rather like going on to our folder tree on our PC or whatever, and then like opening up our camera and then taking the images of our camera and placing them within a folder and all these things. No, it's all doable from within the software, but the software is referencing the hard drive. So sort of bringing it back into what we're looking at, we're looking at our navigation panel, like I mentioned. So this is how we get to our files. We're looking at our preview panel, which is in the center here, which sort of displays our images within this folder. And then on the right-hand side is where we go to sort of provide information, where we go to add information to our images. And we'll touch base on all of these things as we go throughout the workshop today. But just as a quick note, you can make tags on photos. You can add ratings to photos. color labels, categories, keywords, and a variety of other metadata. So we'll touch base with that. And then also, obviously, because I'm working within Manage Mode, if I wanted to bring this image into develop and make development adjustments to her, or if I wanted to bring it into edit mode, I would simply click on these buttons on the top to begin the process of visually editing our files. But that's not what we're doing today. We are organizing our files today. So what is also relevant in this case? So we talked about, okay, so we can assign this information on the right. We can, we can add categories or keywords or metadata or labels and that sort of thing. What happens if I want to sort of visually see those elements? So if I wanted to say, okay, I want to then look at my catalog of images. So also on the navigation panel are two other tabs up here. There's folders, catalog, and calendar. We'll talk about catalog. Calendar, for the purpose of this workshop, is not as relevant. But catalog allows us to bring up images that we've assigned some form of metadata or ACDSee value to. And so what those are, and which we'll talk about a bit later when we go to assign these values, is things like, okay, well, I've applied a category to my image. I've assigned it as an album, a person, a place, or some other various information. Or I've used our facial detection software to add people to my list here. Or I've applied a rating to my image, or a color label, a variety of keywords. So we have this information that we can search by once we've sort of viewed our images and assigned values to it based on a variety of these metadata elements that we're talking about. So that's sort of the gist of it, and in regards to visually what we're operating with. Now, the thing about any software for that matter, but you're probably not going to be operating within the stock layout of the software. And what I mean by that is, okay, this is the way that this software looks like by default, but you've probably found a better workflow in terms of you use certain functionalities and you don't use certain functionalities. And let's talk about how we sort of save our workspace in a way that better reflects the way that we edit photos. Excuse me, I got a bit of a cold here, so the tea is helping. So let's look at how do we do that? How do we go about changing the way that our panels look? So, okay, for example, I've talked about the folders, I've talked about catalog, but I haven't really used this preview function where we show a histogram. This preview function also illustrates, our file size, our actual file dimensions, and in addition, if there was any IPTC data in regards to like, hey, this is the f-stop this image was taken at. This is the, the ISO and that sort of thing. All of those preview elements would be listed here. But for the purpose of this, let's say that I don't actually need these elements, in which case I'd simply just remove this aspect, get rid of it, and then all I can see now is my folders panel. And so what I want to do is, well, I also, as a note, I can take any panel and I can sort of drag it and place it however where I want. You could place it, it gives you this idea based on, these little hubs that pop up where you could place this sort of aspect of your graphic user interface. In the case, I'm actually going to leave it on the left-hand side, but what I am going to do is I'm going to pull my properties panel from where I do my sort of attribution of metadata to my images. I'm going to pull this aspect actually off of the right-hand corner, and I'm going to place it in this subsection here, because I actually want to do all of that assigning and navigating in one place. So that gives me then, a place to sort of reference now with all of that sort of that within the same area. And what that's also done is it's granted me a bit more room visually. So I'm going to just zoom in my images here. As sort of like a slight aside, because I did just sort of navigate to the bottom right-hand corner, this section here allows me to sort of zoom in on my images or zoom out on my images and basically provide more or less visual space for my these preview thumbnails. Yeah, and I think I'm happy with that, so I'm just going to leave it as is. But so now I've sort of moved a graphic user interface element, and I actually prefer it here. This is sort of how I lay out my images for when I'm editing the images generally. Now what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to, okay, so I have my, my preview, and now I have my navigation section and my categorizing section sort of in the same area. Well, I know that this is the way that I want my, this is the way I want it to look like whenever I open up my ACDSee Ultimate. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to save this workspace. And so in order to do that, I would navigate to this top section here where it says Workspaces, and then I'm just going to go to Manage Workspaces. And so when I do this, it's going to list the default workspace, which is awesome, because if I ever want to revert back to the original sort of default, factory default for ACDSee, I can click that and load it. In this case, I'm happy with my current workspace, so I want to actually save this. So I'm going to just click on the Save Workspace button, and I'm going to do that. So let's go, let's just call it my workspace. Click OK. And then the workspace has been saved, which is excellent. Great. And now that's perfectly fine for me to go back to my default workspace at any point. So just clicking again on that workspace button to sort of reopen the original workspace that we had. You'll notice that my preview panel and my C drive, which were sort of this histogram elements that I don't use, are back up. Great. Another thing too is if you're quickly working throughout this mode too, you'll notice these sort of 3 buttons that appear right at the top hand corner. And they have, this is how you essentially can hide certain panels. Now, if I click on the hide right panel, for example, what it's going to do is it's going to get rid of my properties panel. But this is sort of like a temporary action. It allows us to unhide rather these elements at any point. So I just wanted to point out those as well. They're not like a hard and fast change that the workspaces aspect is, but it does allow us to sort of quickly get a little bit more visual room. Anyway, I don't want this default workspace, so I'm actually just going to go back to workspaces and load the one we just created. And hopefully this doesn't take too long here. There we go. Okay. Cool. So okay, so we've talked a bit visually about what we've been looking at and sort of how to alter and edit the sort of pre-existing workspace that is here. So let's sort of move into, we've looked a little bit at the the folders and the sort of the properties, the categorizing. So what I want to do now is I want to take a little bit closer look at the actual preview thumbnails themselves, because they give a lot of information just within their preview, which will enable us to talk a little bit more in greater depth about about the properties and the metadata that they hold within them. So when we look at when we're looking at our preview, our thumbnail here, you'll notice that this one actually, unlike all of the other images within this folder, contains a variety of icons, and we're going to explain what those icons mean. So I've gone ahead and before this workshop started, I went ahead and I kind of added a bunch of these sort of additional values to this image to just give you an idea of what these icons mean, so that we can talk about them in a bit greater depth in a moment here. But so this image has a variety of metadata assigned to it, and then it has these flags assigned to it at the bottom left. In the case of our image, if we click on this little blue square that occurs right at the top of the thumbnail, it's going to bring up this little tiny panel that allows me to sort of apply a color label to this image. Color labeling is actually sort of universal throughout a lot of different softwares. So for example, to just give a sort of a general idea, providing a color label in something like ACDSee will be provided that that metadata has been placed on the file, which we'll talk about in a sec as well. But it will be something you could view in something like Lightroom or other photo editing softwares as well. So in this case, a color label is essentially what it sounds like. It doesn't provide any sort of functionality other than that you have suggested some sort of color associated label for this image. So in the case, and this can be however you'd like to categorize, or it may be like a red image to you as an image that was taken in, you know, like a desert or something like that, or a red image to you as an image that you're planning on getting rid of, or a yellow image is an image that requires, you know, a bit more editing work, and then a green image is one that you're like doesn't require editing, but probably is one you're going to cull or move to a different folder. However you want to assign those values, they're just very flexible values that you can assign to an image. But in the case of our image here, we actually have just a pre-assigned blue label, which we'll just leave on it. And then we have a rating functionality, which is the number that appears next to the color label. Ratings are also, in the same respect to color labels, they are transferable between different platforms. Now, other platforms may use stars to reference their, the quality that you've assigned them, or they might use numbers. But the point is that in any way, you can assign a value of 1 to 5 on your image that sort of indicates you might assign it as quality or some other method. But in this case, we've sort of pre-designated this image as a 4. So, you know, in this case, you know, maybe if we were going through all of our images, 5s were our very best images and 4 were our images that were, you know, really good, but not necessarily ones we'd send to our clients. And then 1 are images that we are very clearly distorted and are just ones that we're going to go through and delete or whatever. They just provide you some form of a way to number and value your images. So those are the sort of 2 elements that exist up at the top. But you'll notice that in the top right-hand corner, there's also an indicator of what the format is for our image. So in the case of this image and all of the images in our current folder, they're listed as JPEGs, which is the JPG that appears in the corner there. Now, if you'd open like a raw image, it would say RAW, or if you opened a TIFF, it would say TIFF. All of these things would sort of be indicated with the that sort of icon that appears in the top right-hand corner. So it's just a quick reference of what exact file format you're working in. And this is probably mostly going to be relevant because a lot of the users of ACDSee will be developing raw images. So in the case of you'll be working off of your specific camera raw model, and then, okay, well, I want to save this image now that I've made development changes to this raw image. I'm going to save it down as a TIFF file, and then I'm going to send that TIFF file to my client, for example. But anyway, this just gives you an indication of what file format that is. And also within this function, we're going to talk about batching later, and batching is a way to save down your image in a different file format. So at the base are a couple different icons. Quickly, tag is just another quick sort of metadata function that allows you to go, okay, well, this is an image directly I need to work with, or you can tag or untag images very quickly. But it's just a function that allows you to sort of quickly flag an image. And then at the base, in this case, we have 5 different icons. And these icons tell very important things about our images. The first icon that we see is this sort of half contrasty looking circle icon that appears right there. What does this icon mean? This icon means that there have been, we have made development changes to this image. And what I mean by that is we've physically taken this image and we've gone into the develop mode and we've made a development change to our image. So let's illustrate this. I'm going to open this, our 5th image here in our folder, and we're going to go into develop mode, and we'll make a slight lighting change to the image. So just bringing it up here and develop. Okay, so we have this wonderful, beautiful pastoral image of this rolling hills, but we're suggesting, okay, well, this looks very nice, but I wish there was a little bit more contrast in this sort of sub area of our image here. So I'm just going to go into, let's go into the linear gradient, assign a linear gradient. And again, I don't want to focus too much on how to make development changes. That's not the purpose of this workshop, but I'm just going to make a quick linear gradient here just to give you an idea. But let's do this. I'm just going to pop this upside down. And then I'm going to apply more contrast to this area. And I will, let's take a look at the original and look at the finished version. I'm just going to bump up the contrast a bit more. Perfect. That's what we wanted. I'm just going to quickly click done on this image after I've made this change, and I will save it. And so by saving it, we will have applied a development to this image, and the development icon occurs just at the bottom left of this image. Now I'm just going to take a brief pause from talking about these icons and just answer Barry's question here. So Barry asks, do color labels always stay with an image even after development changes, or do they need to be reassigned? No, so you can actually make a variety of different editing or developing changes to an image, but the color labels will remain the same. And actually, let's illustrate this because we're going to make other changes to this image. But let's just assign a color label of purple, for example, and then we're going to make development and edit changes to this image. But you don't need to reassign it. So as soon as you've made a change, it's not like that label just disappears. It will maintain. And we can change it or remove it at any point. But editing the image doesn't change it. Okay, so this actually brings up a really good point because we've added a label and another icon has appeared at the bottom left-hand corner. Barry just seamlessly added my next component to this section anyway. So we talked about development changes. We've made a development change to this image, but another icon appeared when we set this value to purple, set the color label to purple. That icon is the pending metadata icon. What does that mean? All of our images in this, in manage mode, after we've added some value to it, whether it be a label, a rating, a keyword, a category, etc., we'll have applied this icon will come up. Now, when I open up ACDSee, in 5 minutes, 30 minutes, the next day, a week later, it will still display this icon. It will remember this information. And in fact, it will also remember this contrast change that we made in develop mode. It will remember all of these things. But what it will not do is allow you to send this image, for example, to a different computer or a different user or something like that, and have that metadata be something that will be visible to that user. What do I mean by that? If we added a label of purple and without embedding the metadata, this pending metadata that we have on this image, if we did not do that, they won't be able to see or visualize that this image has been labeled as purple. So what we must do is embed the metadata within the file so that when we go to send the file, that information will be visible to other parties. We're going to be showing you how to embed metadata in a little bit. So I don't want to deviate too much from that, but we're going to come back to that. Let's just keep that in our hat right now. Right now, we know that when we add information to our files, it doesn't necessarily save it for other people that are wanting to view this file. Just for us viewing these images. So, okay, so we know what the development, we know about the pending metadata one. Let's talk about the editing icon. So I'm going to quickly bring this image into edit mode, and we're going to make a redundant change. It really doesn't matter. I'm just going to go quickly in and make, I don't know, a simple change to this image. Click done. Pardon me. And then I'm going to navigate away. Let's discard. Oh, no, I need it to save. in this case, what this icon is going to illustrate to us is that, that we've made an editing change to this image. So we have this little, moving back to our manage mode here. After we've made a simple, like in this case, lighting change. But this icon now appears that we've made an editing change to this image that we have since saved. So this, in this case, is just another way of flagging, okay, we know that we've made a change to this image. We're just going to indicate that that change has occurred, so we know that it has occurred. There's two more icons that will appear. One is a saved category, or sorry, applied category, and then the other one is snapshots. If we go into, let's assign a category really quickly. So we still have this broad clouds image selected. Remember how I said we could assign values to our image from this properties panel? So for example, we could assign a rating of 3 to this image, and you'll notice that a 3 has popped up right at the top next to our color label. We can change the color label to green from this section, and we can even flag or tag an image from this section as well. What we can also do is add keywords and categories. So for the purpose of just still indicating, or actually, yeah, let's just go over categories and keywords right now, because it's a really useful panel. So categories is the top sections of the properties panel here. Properties is within organize. So there are 3 little tabs that appear at the bottom of the properties panel, one of which is metadata, the second of which is organize, and the third of which is file. So all 3 of these contain different information. Let's go over them. So if we open up the metadata panel, by default, we shall see IPTC data, EXIF data, and ACDSee metadata. If we look at IPTC, it's normally like contextual information about the image and less about the actual like camera model, make, ISO, f-stop that occurs when we take the image. All of this, well, not all of this information, but most of this image, the fields will be fillable, so you can add that information, and then you can apply it when you're done. So if we wanted to just title this image broad clouds like we had in the, we could do so and apply it. So then it occurs with our image here. But that's for the basic functionality of it. IPTC is that first section. It's just contextual information. Creator, copyright notice, intellectual genre, job title, headline, that sort of thing. EXIF is very different. And if this image was a raw image that we had captured on a, on our specific camera model, all of this information would be filled out. This image, for example, was actually just one we got off of a stock photography website. So by default, all these fields are made blank. But if we had taken an image in RAW or whatever, this information would be inputted here. So things like shutter speed, f number, ISO, exposure, focal length, flash, etc. And all that information is listed there. By the way, IPTC and EXIF data, like we had talked about pending metadata, if we've applied changes to these fields, this information will also be pending metadata and will require to be embedded in order for others to view. So just as a notice, so when we go to talk about embedding metadata in a bit, that's also relevant. And then ACDSee metadata is a unique sort of field just for our system. And this is relevant. It allows you to caption an image, allows you to assign a database date. So when was this image added to our database? Import date, the author, in this case, someone like myself, so Adam. The notes, like, hey, the note of this one would be like, I don't know, needs editing or something, or the keywords in this case. The keywords are going to be relevant because we're actually going to add them using the Organize panel, but they'll pop up there in a moment. And then you'll also notice that the label is already indicated as green. So the label that we've assigned here is sort of sitting, waiting right in this bottom ACDSee metadata panel. Okay, so we've talked a bit about metadata. Oh, excuse my cold here. So we'll organize these in a moment. Just as a brief aside, there's also this file panel that occurs at the bottom here. And this indicates pretty much information you'd assume. So we already knew that this was a JPEG based on the icon at the top. This indicates where it's located on my file. Just the rough size in terms of the actual file size itself, when it was created, when it was modified, when it was last accessed, and some other information in regards to the file size and dimensions. So that gives you a bit of context there. But okay, let's add a category. I wanna explore this. There's a couple different ways to add categories. So quick categories is the first panel here. Quick categories allows you to create these sections or like blocks of sort of clickable categories for images. And before I do so, I'm just gonna make sure, this is a quick aside, I'm just gonna make sure that I don't have auto advance on, which I don't. Okay, I'll talk about that in a sec as well. But okay, so let's create a quick category just to give you an idea. So I'm gonna click the drop down here. I'm just gonna click manage quick categories. And it's gonna bring up this board that allows me to sort of assign these values. So if I was basing categories, for example, I mean, okay, so maybe one of these was like I have some wedding related content that I wanted to like groom, or, you know, sort of these categories based on, you know, maybe that's one that we'd want to create. Or maybe for landscapes, I really want to focus in on, you know, water and mountains and let's say sky and sunsets and sunrise. Quick other one, beach. Maybe we want waterfall. What other aspects would we want? Say bridge or forest. And so then once we've sort of assigned some values, which these rows and columns can be adjusted, I'm just going to go in and quickly assign this under, I don't know, this category sept is just going to be called landscape. And so what that does is when I save that category and hit OK, it's going to auto select it for me. And then these values are going to be sort of assigned to this sort of quick access dropdown. So that when I click, okay, so we have, you know, our broad clouds image here. We have, you know, what is it? It's sky, and, you know, we've got some mountains and that sort of thing. So we can assign those values. So I'll just go, let's do that. Sure, let's create this category, create this category as well. And then those categories have then been added to my list of categories. And this image has then thus been flagged with those two qualities. When this image has been sort of categorized, the other sort of panel that pops up, this preview icon, is this category icon. And again, what that means is, okay, you've assigned a category to this image. However, once again, this would need to be embedded in order for this to be viewable for others. Currently is viewable for you. There's other ways to add categories. Within this same panel, we can just simply right-click on the categories panel itself and just add a new category. So you go friends, and then it will allow us to create a new top category. So friends is going to add to this category, and then it pops up right there, unclicked in this case. If we wanted to, you know, add a subcategory to friends, for example, we could add a new category to that item. And in this case, what's going to change here is instead of creating a new top-level category, it's going to create a subcategory within the current selection. And under friends, let's add the name, I don't know, let's just add family, for example. And then we'll hit OK. And you'll notice that that subcategory has been added to the friends category. So that's just a very rough sort of way of looking at categories and how to assign those sort of values. But importantly, we know that that new icon has been popped up. And we know that that's how we add, we add categories to an image. But because we're also in this panel, let's talk about keywords as well. I'm going to add keywords to this sort of Moroccan image that we have here. So I'm just going to click it instead. And then let's begin by adding a couple keywords. So we've already talked about quick categories. The quick keywords is absolutely no different. It works the same way. However, I actually prefer to use keywords from this sort of entry panel here, which allows you to add a bunch of different categories very quickly. In this case, we could go, it's always separated by commas. So if we add a bunch of information, so there's like a camel in this image, we'll enter that. We'll enter stone, we'll enter, let's say this is in Egypt, we'll enter Egypt, fruit, because we can see fruit carts, people wearing robes, anyway, so we have entered a variety of different information here, and then we would just hit enter to assign those values. And in this case, you can also add a space, or you can add no space, and it will sort of set them for you. But if we're looking at this image, once again, we have a pending metadata icon pop up, just indicating that, hey, you've added keywords to this image. Be aware that those keywords are not yet embedded within the image. Which is sweet, though, because if we go over to the metadata panel, now that we've added keywords, if we open up the ACDSee metadata section, where we noticed the keyword part before, all of that information has thus been added here, and so it's visible within the metadata section. So what have we done here? So we've gone over how to tag, rate, label, add keywords and categories to images. But there was one other icon that appears on this other image that I'd like to go over before we sort of move on to the next section. And that, of course, is the snapshots icon that appears to the right of the pending metadata one on this second beach staircase image. Snapshots that's actually a really cool tool within develop mode. Snapshots allow you to make some adjustments to your image, and then it allows you to sort of save that snapshot and then load your original image at any point, or your snapshot at any point. So let's illustrate this. I'm going to find an image with, I don't know, some suboptimal feature. We already talked a bit about that one. Yeah, let's do this guy right here. We're going to edit this image. So I'm going to take this kind of mucky image right here, and we're going to pull it into develop mode. So if I pull this image in develop mode, you'll notice that that same icon that we saw appear at the base of the thumbnail appears at the very top of our development section. Now, keeping in mind, I don't want to take too much time away from manage mode because this is not a development section video, but this is an important element of manage mode as well, and so we should talk about it. So here we have our image. We have this sort of beautiful, sort of misty image with like, you know, a sort of a creek running through. It's a very mucky looking, very northwestern looking image. And what do we want to do? Well, for one, I definitely want to add a bit of a dehaze change to this image just so we can sort of see through a bit of this mist that appears in the midsection and get a bit more contrast to this image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this dehaze meter further up, and you'll start to see our image change pretty dramatically at about the midpoint here. And so when I go to show the original file, we can see that a lot of that haze has sort of been thus removed from the image. Okay, maybe that's the only change we wanted to make this image, but that's great. So we've added this dehaze. Let's go to our snapshots panel and then save a snapshot of this dehaze change. So I'm just going to do it this way. I'm going to go snapshot name, dehaze, and I'll name it dehaze1. I'm gonna hit OK. This snapshot is loadable in develop mode. Let's say, for example, we've made another change to this image. I'm just going to reset this image to its default values. And let's do something different. Let's go to the light EQ panel and let's just bring down the shadows pane, bring down the midtones pane, and we'll also add, yeah, let's do a color EQ change. Or no, sorry, let's do a white balance change as well. So I'm just gonna pull this temperature sort of more yellowy looking in appearance. And then, so we've changed two values. We've changed white balance and light EQ. Notice from this sort of blue icon that just appears to the right of them. And let's save another snapshot. So let's save this snapshot as well. So we're gonna call this white light, and we'll hit OK. Or let's add a 1 next to it. So if we hit OK, this white light snapshot is thus saved to this image. And then we can view the dehaze, so our original snapshot. We can reset to our originals, or we can view our white light change. And so we can frequently switch between the three values here on our image. In this case, let's just load our dehaze one here. And then actually, you know what? Let's do this. Let's reset to defaults, because set this image back to its original values and go back into our manage mode. I'm just going to discard any changes we made to this image. And then if we're looking at this image here, we can see that there is a snapshot button that's been assigned here. So what that means is the snapshot that we just created, even though we didn't save that image, those snapshots are still saved as a sort of a sidecar file in regards to this image. So if we were then going back into this image in a future, we're saying like, hey, I looked at this 2 weeks ago. I want to look at this today. Let's see what snapshots we made on this image. If I pull this image into develop mode, you'll notice that those same snapshots will appear to the left here. So we could reopen dehaze at any point. We could reopen that, white light one we made, and then it brings up that change we made to our image. This is actually a pretty good time to also talk about, so when you've assigned a change to in develop mode or edit mode or however, you can always sort of work within manage mode to right click and then sort of reset this image back to its original values before it was edited. So if we go up to process at the top here, or rather, oh, it looks like in this case, I did click on an image that already was restored to its original values. So let's take this one example. Yeah, cool. So this image, that the broad clouds one that we made, if I can remember some levels adjustments to, we can restore to the original just by clicking on that button right there. And this will allow us to restore it to original. And then those two tabs that occurred there, the one that was the development tab, the develop changes, and the editing changes have thus been removed from the image. But we still have the categories and the pending metadata flagged right there. So, well, that gives a pretty good idea of sort of how to edit, or in this case, what those different icons mean that appear above the images. And all of them serve a really important purpose to just remind you what have been done to your images. But also with a couple of sides there, we learned a little bit more about like adding keywords, and we also learned about like snapshots and what development mode changes do, and also how to reset your images back to their original values, which are useful because oftentimes you make changes to an image and you go, just don't want that. So that talks about those values. I want to talk about a couple other things that are on sort of this top section here. We talked about workspaces already, which is really useful. I'm going to skip over import. We're going to talk about batch. We're going to talk about editors, and we're going to talk about actions, which are three sort of functionalities that I use within manage mode very regularly. So batch mode is really cool. There's a bunch of different batch functions. So you can batch export, which means that you can save this image down as a different file type and however you want or where you want to export it, that sort of thing. The ones I'm going to be focusing on, the one I'm rather going to be focusing on today is the batch develop function. But they also have convert file format, rotate, flip, batch edit, resize, just all these sort of values that allow you to make changes to a variety of files. So for example, if I was to just select a batch, in this case I just have 3 images, but I could, you know, have any amount of images. I could select 100 image, for example. We can rotate these 3 images by just, you know, going to the batch functionality. So say we want to rotate these images, I don't know, 90 degrees. It's going to run through this process, and then we have rotated our images. See here. Let's make a batch development change though. I'm just going to unrotate these. Awesome. Cool. So we did already do snapshots. And so I think what we're going to do is we're going to make another development change to this image, but we're going to save down that development change as a preset. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use that preset to batch develop a variety of images. And I'll explain in a sec. But first of all, we need to make a functional development change to our image in order to illustrate that we can save this preset. So let's go back into our broad clouds image and go into develop and discard edits. It's fine. Awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, we're going to darken the bottom section of this image. So I'm going to go to, let's see, light EQ, and let's pull down midtones. And let's change the color EQ. I want to get a bit more cyan out of the cloud section here. So I'm going to pull that value up. And let's just take a quick look at our original. Yeah, let's maybe make one more change in that white balance. I'm just going to slightly cool this photo down a bit. Oh yeah, it's perfect. There we go. Let's just take a quick note of what images or what sort of aspects we've changed in develop mode. We've changed the white balance, the light EQ, and the color EQ. What I'm going to then do is I'm going to adjust development settings, and I'm going to save this preset. So just in a brief and aside before we save this preset, why would I be doing this? In order to batch develop images, so in order to apply a development change to, say, 30 images, we first need to be able to instruct the program on what changes we're going to be making. And so that's why we're changing one image in this case and making a preset right now before we go about developing a bunch of different images. So in this case, we have very clearly made a couple of pretty simple editing adjustments to this image. So we need to now like save this preset that we've created by navigating to the bottom here under Save Preset. And then we're just going to select the things or the values that we changed. Now keep in mind too, this sort of brings up this huge box here that sort of allows you to say, okay, well, I want to, you know, the elements that I have changed, the white balance, the light EQ, and the color EQ, are the ones that we want to focus on. So I'll just quickly check these. And color EQ, and light EQ, and white balance. Where are you, white balance? Oh, there it is. Duh. We could select these elements individually like we just have. And this will, when we go to save this preset, it will only focus on those 3 elements. Now, in our development changes that we've made to this image, we actually haven't made any other adjustments. So to save time, what you could also do is just go about selecting all the fields. And then realistically, because we've only made changes to color Q, white balance, and light EQ, it would then just reflect our images with these 3 changes. But say you'd made also changed to this image where you'd gone in and you'd changed the effects, or you'd made brush changes and that sort of thing. Well, you could go about ignoring those by just specifically selecting the ones you wanted. Anyway, we're just going to select all in this case because it's just as fast. And we'll name a preset for here. This one we're just going to call it Lighting Plus. And we'll hit OK. It says settings saved to preset Lighting Plus. Excellent. Now that we're happy with our preset, we're going to navigate back to Manage Mode. I'm just going to discard this. And then what I can do is select a portion of images. So let's go down to the bottom here and select these last 4 images. And I'm going to run this batch development on these 4 images. So I'm going to select batch. I'm going to select batch develop. And then it says select a development preset. Well, we just made Lighting Plus. So let's check Lighting Plus and then run this development change. I'm just going to go develop on these 4 images, and it's going to apply them. You'll notice that as I go through, those icons are appearing on our images that indicate that these images have thus been developed. So now if we look at all of our images, those development presets have been added here, which is great. Because if I wanted to go in and make a development change to this image, if we looked at our what is changed to this image, well, it is exactly what we had selected. So it's that white balance, that light EQ, and that color EQ change that has occurred here. Now, keeping in mind too, if we were not fond of these specific preset changes or whatever, we could always reset to defaults on our image. Or from within Manage Mode, go to Process and Restore to Original. Yeah, sure, let's restore to original on all of our images. But in essence, what we quickly did is made a very real, development adjustment to these images and played them all in at once, saving us, a massive amount of time. So that's sort of the batch function in regards to developing changes. Let's talk quickly about editors. So editors is this sort of function that appears here. So there's batch, create, slideshow, send, and editors. Editors is useful for basically adding a program outside of ACDSee to do some form of editing functionality to your image. And then, so say, let's give you a hypothetical. Say, for example, you want to use, Capture One or something like that for a specific edit to your image that software does better or whatever. You could add an editor within ACDSee to open up and functionally play that, that change. And then at any point, you can also return to ACDSee to go back to your sort of management functionalities. So let's just quickly add an editor. I'm going to go to editors and configure my editors. And this allows me, it just basically brings up this sort of box here that indicates which editors have been added. I'm going to click add. Then I'm going to navigate on my, my system here. So let's just add like Photoshop, for example. Sure. Let's do that. So I'm just going to select an executable file and hit OK. And then now that editor has been added to my list. And at any point, what we can do is we could edit this, we could add or remove this, or if we wanted to reprioritize and we had multiple editors, we could move this editor up and down. I'm just going to hit OK. And then if I wanted to edit this image in an editor, I could right click on it and go to the external editor function and the second section down here. Or I could also go within the editor function and just open it up from right here. So there's a lot of ways for me to quickly and effectively sort of like multitask my images from within this ACDSee management function to a different editing functionality. And that could be for anything too, like if you were just working on Mac and really preferred, you know, viewing your images in like, I don't know, pictures or whatever the default application is, you can also add that to just bring up your image. So it gives you this functionality to be able to sort of move between your favorite programs. Okay, so very similar to batch develop is another functionality called actions. They are different. Actions is a way to record your changes that you make to an image and then apply those recorded changes to your images, whether be it bulk or singular or however you want. Actions is also unique to ACDSee in that it also allows you to save your actions so that other users can use them and import them and export them. And it's basically this hub that allows you to sort of make these kind of fun changes to your images however you want, and then provide other users the ability to do the same. But notably, what we also use it for is the ability to go through and make quick, seamless adjustments to a bulk variety of files. But there is a difference. And the difference is that in terms of developing raw and making batch developments, that would more be something that you'd utilize for raw images, whereas the actions functionality can be used for raw images, but it's more used for more compositional images. So let's show you how to use actions, but first I'm just going to illustrate where it is in the manage mode section. So it's located right here, and it allows you to bring up the actions browser itself, which is this little guy. And what it also allows you to do is quickly play actions from this panel. So you can go through and sort of basically quick apply these actions to whatever you selected. But you can record actions from within edit mode. And there's a little bit more depth to what you can record in edit mode than what you can do for batch developments. So let's go over it quickly. I'm just going to select an image here and I'm going to bring it up in edit mode. Oh yeah, definitely we can make changes to this. So what I'm going to do is actions, much like manage mode, is located just up at the top here. This button allows you to open up your actions browser, very similar to how we just did in manage mode. And then this allows you to stop recording, to record an action, and to play an action. So I want to record an action because we plan on using this action as a bulk action in our manage mode. So I'm just going to simply hit record new action, and then it's going to pop up this little dialog box. And in this dialog box, it's going to say that we're recording, and it's going to list what we've done to this image. So let's start making some changes to this image. I guess for one, we're going to add definitely another dehaze to this. I would just slide this bar further forward. And this is just to sort of remove some of the mist that appears in that foreground there. Nice. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to try to get rid of this kind of purpley look that appears here by adding a white balance change, pulling the green tint further, and I'm going to see if I can move this guy a little bit further forward too. Give me an idea. Okay. Getting rid of a bit of that yellow, or sorry, that red that appears there. I'm also going to go into, let's go into color EQ. And I'm going to hue, and I'm just going to try to focus in specifically on that red. And I'm going to pull the slider down until I can find a healthier middle ground, because the sort of the edges of this image are quite red. So if I move this slider up with this sort of pinky sort of, you'll notice that I can make that area a bit more blue. Oh, there we go. That's the other bottom out. Okay. Let's take a look at the original again. Okay, I think I'm happy with those changes. There's a lot less red on the edges here, and we've adjusted some of the dehaze here. So if we look back at a recording action, we can see that, okay, we've added dehaze, we've adjusted it, we've added a white balance, we've adjusted it, and we've added a color cue, and then we've adjusted it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this action by stop recording, and I'm just going to call this red fix with dehaze. And I'm going to save it under my name, but in essence what the second category here is asking you is it's asking where would you like to place this, this action. And we have a couple different options. We can add it to our favorites, our film mask, our new effects, etc. Or we could even simply just add a new category. So if we wanted to start a category just called fixes or something like that, we could do so and save it to that one. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate back to manage mode. And if we take another image, for example, like this image right here, we can look up to our actions section here, and we can go under fixes, and we'll see that this red fix with dehaze is right there. So we could then play that, action on this image. But before I do that, I'm actually going to go to the options panel, and we're going to sort of configure how this is saved when we go to play the actions here. So if we go for, so here we have red fix with dehaze output options. And right now, what it's going to do is it's going to replace modified images and place in source folder. Or sorry, rather rename modified images and place within source folder. But we have some other options on how this could be saved. So we could just simply overwrite the selected file and create a copy in case of non-encodable files. So in a lot of ways, that's probably not what we want to do, because just in case we want to preserve our original image, we probably don't want to overwrite it. So we'd probably like to rename it. But alternatively, what we could also do is we could place the modified images within a following folder. So if I click this here, and then we can browse for a folder, I'm going to navigate down to, so still within pictures. Let's see here. So I'm within workshops. So I'm going to go into that folder. I'm going to go into the same folder that we have Photos 2019. But within it, I'm just going to make a new folder and name it Fixes. Hit OK. So now you'll see that a folder has been added to the same folder we're operating in. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to save my fixes to that image, or to that folder rather. And then if I wanted to, I could change the file format. So say let's save this as a TIFF file instead of a JPEG file. And we're happy with the other actions within here. But we want to make sure that that fixed file does not overwrite or land in the same folder that we are operating in. I'm going to hit OK, and then let's play that action. So let's play that action specifically on this one, red fix with dehaze on this mucky image. Now this image also doesn't have the same like overbearing redness that the Misty Glade image does, but let's just have a look in here. Oop. Oh, there it is. It's placed into, I see. I just didn't have a chance to save the, click on the folder before I labeled it. Let's take a look at that. There you go, that's why. I wanted that one, not just a brand new folder. Let's do that again, just to illustrate it. So it's simply running that action, and it's playing within here. Just going to navigate away and back into the folder to refresh it. And then we've saved our new image here with those sort of action changes to this image. Now, noticeably too, because we suggested that this folder should be saved as a TIF file, we'll notice that the top right-hand corner where it indicates the file format has changed and now indicates a TIFF instead of a JPEG. So we've gone about and we could, like I said, you know, we could have made that change on, you know, any number of images or specific images within our folder and played it on a variety of different images at once. But it gives us a bit of grasp of a bit further control in terms of these images. And the difference too is, in this case, when we made these editing changes to this image and we've, you know, played it on this image, it's created a brand new image for us instead of just simply adjusting the development changes on an image. The development changes are non-destructive. The action that we just created creates a whole new file. So it is, in this case, sort of a destructive change to this file. So we've talked about the batch editing and actions functionality of the sort of top bar that appears here, this kind of menu bar. There's two things I want to touch base on. But first of all, I'm just going to delete these folders because we don't need them. Now, again, working off of our hard drive, simply deleting a folder is going to put it within our trash bin. But so we want to talk about databasing, first and foremost, and embedding metadata. So these are two, we've talked a lot about embedding metadata, so let's just get it out of the way right from the bat. Embedding metadata is within the tools functionality. So where was our image here that had all the keywords? I believe it was this guy right here. Yeah, so we're gonna select this image and we have this pending metadata flag that appears at the bottom left. I'm just gonna navigate to tools, metadata, and I'm going to embed ACDSee metadata in my selected file. I can embed it in all files within this folder, but in this case, we're just going to embed it within the selected file. We can also clear the embedded pending flag, which gets rid of that icon that just appears right there. But let's do this. Let's embed in selected file. I'm going to suggest yes to this. And then the pending edit, metadata is gone. And this would now be visible to anyone who has the ability to view those keywords that we've added to this image. So that's how you add or embed rather metadata within a file. But the question that comes up quite often is, okay, so I have an older version of ACDSee Photo Studio 2018 or 2017 or something like that. How do I go about saving my existing database and then opening an older database? Databases have the functionality that allows you to save a variety of different sort of metadata for your files and pull that metadata into the most recent version of the software. So what databasing covers is actually this. So if we go back to our metadata panel and I just open up ACDSee metadata, so it covers, so when we go to save a database, what is saved are the following items. Categories. So those categories that we added earlier to the broad clouds image and the beach staircase, those are saved. Notes are saved, which are indicated right here under the ACDSee metadata section. Keywords are saved. We added a variety of keywords to this image. We also embedded those keywords. Color labels, so the green label that would occur here or the blue label that would occur here, those are saved. Authors, which appear also within the ACDSee metadata, dates, which appear here, and then ratings, those numbers that we assign to these images, and of course, captions, so this caption that appears at the top of the metadata panel. So I like to think of it as this ACDSee meta panel, in addition to labels, ratings, keywords, and categories. So when we go to, so when you're operating with an ACDSee, so say that 2019 is your most current version, and you've made a variety of different categories and all these sort of elements and components that you want to incorporate for when the next version comes out in the next year. What you go about doing is you would, in this case, navigate to File, Database, and create a new database, or operate from your original database or however, whatever you're working off of. But then when you go into the newest version of the product or the next version or whatever version you're using, but you want to operationally open the database of your older version, you would simply click open and then navigate to those elements, navigate to that database file on your hard drive. So that when you open it up, it will carry on that information to those images that you have stored on your hard drive. There will be instances where you'd probably have to optimize your database. And while I can't comment too much on that, there is more database functions under the tools panel, which allows you to back it up, restore it, import and export different database options. So that's within the tools panel in the sort of upper menu bar here. So then what else have we talked about too? We've talked about ratings, keywords, categories, labels, and tagging images. Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered it all in regards to the sort of set things that I had to talk about in regards to ACDSee Photo Studio Ultimate 2019. So just a quick recap. Today we talked about the sections in manage mode, sort of what they do, and sort of how to move them around and navigate and save new workspaces. We talked about navigation, the preview, in addition to categorization. We showed you how to categorize images by numbers, so ratings in this case, labels, keywords, categories. We showed you all about the pending flags that appear at the bottom left of your image that indicate development, editing, whether or not your image has pending metadata or snapshots and all these things. We talked about batch editing. We talked about editing with actions. And we talked about adding editors so that we can use external programs, in addition to databasing, and then finally embedding the metadata once we have it listed on our images. So that covers pretty much it. I'm going to stick around for a bit more, but I noticed this was a fairly low question section. So if you have any questions, I'd be delighted to answer them. And if you would like to ask a question that I wasn't able to cover today, or something that you think is outside of the manage mode section, I would be happy to answer it. My email is aprice@acdsystems.com. But yeah, if you don't have any questions, I'd like to thank you all for showing up and watching. I understand that as well, sometimes you just have workshops where, people just want to follow along. And that's truly what, what this is. Anyway, thanks for hanging out and participating in the workshop. I'm just going to hang out for a bit myself and just see if anyone has any final questions. But yeah, that's it for the workshop today on Manage Mode. Emma, thank you so much. Hopefully that helps with your workflow, and yeah, I appreciate you sticking around. That was an hour, just over an hour, which is awesome too, because sometimes these have a tendency to run quite a bit longer. So it's always nice when we have it just on time. So yeah. Barry asks, thank you, Adam. Very interesting. Can you explain more about backing up the database? This is sort of, unfortunately, this is kind of a hole in my my knowledge in terms of the databasing. But let's just entertain this question and try it out. So we've talked about what a database contains, and it's not much. It's those sort of qualities that you get here. But if you want to back up your database, so it prompts you through this wizard here. So I guess the purpose of backing up a database would be like, hey, I want to place this database on an external hard drive or something like that. So at least I can create a, at least I have, have this exist elsewhere just in case I'm worried about, the quality of my original database or whatever. So this wizard will guide you through the process of backing up your database information files. You can create a backup of both your database information and your files, or back up your database separately. You can also update a previous backup to include new information or files. Oh, so that's useful too. So you can go through, and so if you, this is actually really relevant. So you have an operational database, you backed it up to a different hard drive, and then you've made about 6 months worth of changes or added new categories and keywords and all of these things. And then what you could simply do is select this secondary function to update a database. And then you basically navigate to the database that you created, and then allows you to sort of update the old one. So this would allow you to go through and kind of add as you go through. But let's just go to next. So new backup, select the information you'd like to include in this backup. Oh yeah, we definitely want thumbnails. But it says do not include thumbnails. So this is really relevant too. So when it comes to databasing, when you open up a new, so when you start with a new program, what it will probably not remember is just how many thumbnails it saved. So thumbnails being these literal representations of your folders. So if you have a folder with 1,500, 3,000 images, it's going to take a bit longer to load than a folder that contains 30. And the difference in this case is a saved database that understands those thumbnails. So what I'd recommend when you're saving databases, even though in this case it says it's recommended to save space, for all intents and purposes, I probably would include those thumbnails. So yeah, so let's just include those. Backup files of type, image, media, archive in this case. Oh yeah, we just don't even need to click that. We'll just go, it's just fine as is. But I would generally include those thumbnails just so that we don't have to reload them next time we open up our folder of 1,500 images. And then it allows you to place it and enter a name for your backup. So it gives you a location where you go to put it. I'm just going to go with whatever one it's currently set up here. And let's go backup 2019. Hit next. So there it is, date, estimated size, 65 megabytes. It's not even that big. And then it says contains no files, includes all thumbnails. Great. So we hit next. And then it's going to go about backing up that database, compress it down, and it's been successfully completed. So if I go to this database and we go to update, now that I have an existing one, it allows me to update an existing backup. So hopefully that answers a little bit more of your question in regard to backing up your database, Barry. Again, this is a little bit more of a hole in my knowledge, but hopefully that's helpful. John asks, John, I can import a list of keywords in a blank Lightroom, then export, I guess you mean, into ACDSee. This gives a hierarchical keyword list. Is there a workaround for synonyms? That I would probably have to ask the developers. I am unclear on that one. So John, if you can please send me an email, I can ask the developers in regards to that and find out, or at least get a more exhaustive answer for you in regards to that question. Donald asked, does a developed photo keep its changes if played on another computer? So when you develop an image, what develop mode does is, because develop mode is non-destructive, right? I've talked about it being when you go to make a change within develop mode, you can still reference your original file at any point. What develop mode does is, and especially in reference to raw files, is it creates a sidecar file. What is that? A sidecar file is essentially a folder of all these preferences and criterias, basically a data folder that contains what changes you've made to that image. So in order to play a developed image on another computer, and what I mean by that is, have the image, the original image that you would be developing, plus this sidecar file, you would need to basically present and copy that sidecar file to the other computer. Because when you go and you send someone, okay, so let's say, for example, okay, you have a raw file, great, you've made some changes to it, awesome, you send someone else that raw file. Well, when they open that raw file, it's going to be exactly the way that you took it initially with your camera. Why is this? The reason why is because raw files in themselves are not editable. You cannot change the color of a raw file or the hue or the contrast or whatever within ACDSee and then simply overwrite the save on that raw file. And that's what I mean when I say it creates this sidecar file. That sidecar file is the file that contains the changes that you've made to the raw file. So in order to see those changes, you must reference that sidecar file. Now, that being said, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't just like go in, make a development change to an image, and then save it down as like a JPEG or TIFF or some other file format. If you do that, absolutely, those changes will be viewable to the person you send the file to. But I hope that answers your question. It's a bit more on the nitpicky end of the development side. But this is why when we go to make development changes to an image, it's still referenceable. That there still should be suggested that we always save as an image. We save that image as some other file, or we make a copy of it, and that's why we can. And that's the sort of the file that we can view. But for the purpose of editing your own images, develop mode is excellent because it always allows you to view the original file. It always allows you to preserve that value while being able to go in and make visual adjustments for yourself. Hopefully that answers your question. Anyway, so Bruce said, thank you for your interesting session. Very useful function. Awesome. I'm not sure whether or not that's going to be expanded upon, Bruce, but if you send me an email, I can find out from the developers. We have a lot in production right now in terms of things that we're improving and changing in terms of products. So that would be what I'm curious on. Anyway, again, so just to reiterate, I don't have answers for everything, but I know the people that do. So if you want to shoot me an email at aprice@acdsystems.com with all of your questions in relation to the content that we talked about today, or just anything I can't answer, I'd love to answer that question or to contact the developers at our office here that can help answer those questions. Otherwise, I think I'm going to sign off here, guys, but I appreciate so much you hanging out and participating in this first aspect of our workshop, which is on manage mode. Just as an aside too, I will update this manage mode workshop to YouTube, and we'll get it live just in case any of you guys want to watch it in the future. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.